Hello, everybody, and welcome to this panel on regenerative agriculture as part of the UN Global Compact. Thanks for joining us today. Ben Fargher is my name, and I'm the Managing Director of Sustainability for the Cargill agricultural supply chain in North America. And I'm really excited today because we've got three people on our panel that are on the front line of the intersection between agriculture, food, sustainability, people that are actually making a difference and have expertise in the space. And we wanted to convene this panel today to hear from them and just get some of those insights. We've only got a short period of time to do that. So really excited just to get a flavour from what they're seeing in their part of the world in this system as we try and overcome some of these challenges together, producing food and also meeting the environmental challenges that we have as a globe and in our food production system. So with that, just a quick introduction, and then I'm going to actually ask them to introduce themselves so you can hear from them direct. But we do have our Klein with us today, who's a grower, a farmer from Illinois. We've got Dr. Wayne Honeycutt, who is the President and CEO of the Soil Health Institute, with us today. And we have Margaret Henry, who's the Director of Sustainable Agriculture for PepsiCo, with us today. So thank you, the three of you, for your time. We know you're all very, very busy, but it's great to have you with us and look forward to hearing your voice. So with that, if I could just set the scene, Al, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Do you mind just letting the audience know where you farm, what crops or commodities you farm, and just a little bit about yourself and your operation, please?
My name is Al Klein. I farm in Southern Illinois. This is my 50th corn crop from finish to end, so it's kind of exciting for me. We started the cover cropping for soil erosion, and we saw pretty good benefits from that, and then we just moved on from there, and we got better over the years as we went. We went to, terminating the cover crops early and really wasn't getting the benefit. And we went to planting green the last few years, and we built a crimping roller. If the cereal rise at anthesis, we can roll it, crimp it, kill it, and no herbicide application on that one pass. So I could go on and on, but that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Al. We'll definitely come back to hearing some more about it because I think people hear the concepts but don't necessarily understand what it means and the actual impact. So I look forward to that. Wayne, the Soil Health Institute, people too close to your organisation will know the great work you're doing, but some may not. So do you mind just giving a quick overview of your organisation, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks to Cargill for pulling this together for us. My name is Wayne Honeycutt, and I'm the President and CEO for the Soil Health Institute. We are a nonprofit. We are located in North Carolina, but we actually are working in several countries now. So our mission is to safeguard and enhance the vitality and productivity of soils. And we do that through a lot of different ways. We basically take the premise that, although there needs to be more research conducted, that there has been a sufficient amount conducted that gives us that confidence that we need to know that, these soil health proving practices are good for farmers and for the environment. But they need, in order, additional information to get that level of adoption. And so that takes us down the road of doing research on the business case for that adoption, on the best measurements so that farmers can monitor their progress. It gives us the work that we need to do for developing education programs for farmers and some of the research that backs that up. But then even after we get that level of adoption, we don't stop there, but that we also help quantify the impacts, because impacts on things like productivity tie right back into the business case, but impacts on things like carbon, water quality, then that helps us inform policies and also educate consumers, which can also, again, drive more market demand back for that business case. So I just kind of walk you through the full loop of our comprehensive strategy that we use at the Soil Health Institute. But at the center of it is the farmer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Wayne. That's excellent. Great overview. Really, really informative. Thanks. And to Margaret, Many people in the audience will know PepsiCo, of course, but could you just give us a quick overview and flavor of your reach?
Sure thing. Absolutely. And thanks for having us here today. I know this topic of regenerative agriculture is near and dear to my own heart, as well as my organization. I was born and raised on a dairy farm in Kentucky. And, I've been on this journey my whole life. PepsiCo's been on this journey for a really long time, too. So you might know PepsiCo, you might think of us as some of our beverages that you love to enjoy. We also have a wide range of other things that you're probably enjoying right now. If it's your morning Quaker Oats and glass of orange juice from Tropicana, or if it's some of those Lay's and Fritos and Tostitos and Doritos out there, maybe a little Sabra hummus on your lunchtime sandwich. So we have at our heart agriculture. For all of those brands. They all come from farmers, and they all come from farmers who are critical to us all around the world. So when you think of PepsiCo, you might not think of an agricultural company, but it's certainly how we think of ourselves.
Great, thanks, Margaret. It's a great snapshot. And I think that often people don't necessarily understand, because they see the brands, just the breadth of the PepsiCo's activity and things that they do with their daily lives. So thank you. So look, with that introduction, you can see the expertise, and I said our panel were on the front line. Well, you can see that I was right. And so let's go back to Al, because Al, you started talking a little bit about some of your practices, but for people not close to it, like many in the audience, with practices such as cover crops, which I know you're involved with, can you just explain exactly what does that mean, that type of practice? Or an example of a type of practice. What does it mean, and what's the benefit that you're seeing on your farm, in terms of the environment and the economics of your operation?
Well, it's the cover crop thing is what we're doing. We're seeding cereal rye in front of our beans in the old corn stalks. And the main reason I started all this was soil erosion, and it worked, but it's been a long, hard learning curve to do this without any support. And guys like Wayne, if I'd have known him, I could have saved a lot of money. So it's a hard learning curve, and I'm older, so I just made a commitment for whatever reason to make the soil better for the future generations. And what I've seen in it's not going to, this thing doesn't turn around overnight. When you start programs and get people to do it for payment, they're not going to see the benefit in the first year or two. It takes a little bit. And soil health is what I'm mainly focused on right now. It started with erosion, then it went to weed control, and then now I'm into soil health. So it's a long learning curve to do this, scouting, and a huge commitment. And you're going to have failures, but we've had failures in conventional tillage. But after a few years of this, I've really seen the benefits, and I'm excited about it. But it's a hard learning curve, and guys like Wayne, for the knowledge and the information, is more important than anything else to learn how to do it.
That's excellent, Al. And would love to come back to you to talk about, specifically more about some of those benefits and what you're seeing, and obviously make the link through to how we explain some of those benefits to our consumers as well, and with Margaret. But Wayne, to you, obviously you've got a lot of experience working with growers like Al and others. And does that resonate with you, what Al's saying about the fact that it does take time? And when we talk about regenerative ag and soil health, we've just mentioned cover crops and some other activities that Al's doing, but how can you help the audience? Is there a particular definition around it, or how do you see that sort of regenerative ag landscape?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's really a real pleasure to be with Al here. I can't wait to get to his farm here, and hearing him talk about it makes me want to go to it right away. Don't worry, Al, if I show up, I'll wear a mask. But what it's interesting in regenerative agriculture, I think it does still mean different things to different people. And to us at the Soil Health Institute, obviously, we are biased towards the soil health component. But I would say that to us, soil health is the very foundation for regenerative agriculture. And but I'll tell you, it's not just us. There was a recent study that came out where they looked at over 200 different scientific journal articles and over 25 different practitioner websites. And by far, the first primary outcome, the predominant outcome across all of those for regenerative agriculture was considered to be soil health. And so there are others, like carbon sequestration and biodiversity. And some of them had some social impacts. Obviously, there's tie-ins there, but soil health was the premier one. And that really resonates with me, not just because I'm with the Soil Health Institute, but because I think that's what's in my mind. And again, I know I'm biased, but in my mind, that's what's important for farmers. I mean, because they know when they get a heavy rain, does it infiltrate into their soil or does it run off and take precious soil with it? Or when they get in a drought period, is there, do their crops yield better than their neighbors that are not using these soil health improving practices or not? And those are indicators of how well that soil is functioning. And that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about soil health. And so I think that there's not so much a universally agreed upon, definition of it. And I guess that's okay. Maybe I'll leave that to others to debate. But in my mind, soil health is the very foundation for it. And I think, in my mind, I think it's important that we use that soil health terminology when we're speaking to farmers about regenerative agriculture, because that resonates with them. And they walk their land, they see the changes in their soil, they know how things are different from one part of the field or in one field to another. And so I think it's just important for us to also keep that in mind.
Well, points well made. Thanks, Wayne. And Margaret, so for you and PepsiCo, we know you've been leading in this space, and you've got specific commitments around regenerative agriculture. Do you mind just explaining some of those and how you see this framework?
Absolutely. Just yesterday, PepsiCo launched our PepsiCo Positive overall sustainability umbrella. And earlier this year, we made a commitment to regenerative agriculture across all of our supply chains. And I think the point that Al made is really central to understanding what does that mean? Is that just a new catchy phrase, or what in the world does that actually mean to farms? And Al, you started talking about why you're on this journey around soil erosion. And I think that's really critical. And Wayne, you've pointed out the criticality of soil health to regenerative agriculture. When we looked at what did we mean by this commitment, we started with Al's premise of what's the problem we're trying to solve. And when we're looking at the 60 different countries where we source from, the 25 different ingredients, it's not going to be, soil erosion or water quality or on every single farm. It's going to be a little different. But we are fundamentally trying to solve a problem, which is farm resilience, which is keeping farmers farming for the long term. And that's tough. Al also talked to, and Wayne talked to, sometimes there's a long return on investment for some of these practices. You're not going to see the benefit year one. But we think that it's really critical to help the farmers in our supply chain, to be there with them on this long-term journey of understanding how to keep their farm strong for the long term. If it's, soil health and cover crops, how do you keep that soil covered so that you don't lose the soil, so that you maintain the nutrients, so that you improve the water availability in that soil? There's a million different benefits to some of these regenerative agriculture practices, but it takes a little while to do them right. You'll have some failures along the way. You really need to have the right kind of advice. You need to have the right kind of support to get it done. And so when we define regenerative agriculture, that's a real hot topic. Is there going to be a certification? Is there going to be a specific definition? We're sort of stepping outside of that debate and saying it's about the impacts. So we've defined regenerative agriculture as having a positive impact on 5 different categories. The first and foremost is soil health. And so we want to figure out how to help our farmers have a measurable benefit on soil health. The second is around greenhouse gases, sequestration, and reduction. And as a major food company, we are held accountable by our customers and our consumers for having those kinds of commitments. So we want to figure out that we can do that hand in hand with farmers, not pass down some edict, but actually be there with them to figure out what's right for each farm. And it's going to be a little different. It's not going to be one practice that we implement and tell farmers how to farm around the world. That's not the business that we're in. We're in trying to figure out what works for them. The third category is watershed health. Each watershed's different. It's going to need some different kinds of actions. The fourth is biodiversity. And the fifth is livelihoods. We don't think this is only an environmental game. It has to work for farmers, and it has to help economically maintain that farm. So when we look at regenerative agriculture, we look at positive impact across those 5 different pillars of impact for us. And so it's going to look a little different on a 1/2 hectare potato farm in India and a 20,000 acre oats farm. Where you need a helicopter to get from one side to the other. What regenerative agriculture looks like might be a little different, but the impacts that we have, we're going to measure across those same categories, and we're going to find that path that really sustains that farm for that long term.
No, that's great. A great synopsis or overview there, Margaret, of how you define it, but in that broad context. And we see it at Cargill very similarly, because each farm is different, and we want to meet our growers where they are. And there's so much good work being done in agriculture, and I'm from a farm family background myself, and just inherently we think about not just the profitability of our farm, but the long-term profitability and passing the farm on to next generations, which just in the 5 minutes we've already had he spoke about in terms of soil health for the next generation. And so meeting growers where they are is one of our key objectives as well. And so with that, back to you. One thing that you mentioned in terms of the long-term investment, Wayne mentioned and Margaret mentioned, was the economics around soil health. And so we've got the concept, but the practical economics on your farm. So can you explain a little bit more about that investment? And again, people that aren't close to this would think, well, gosh, it must, there'd be costs associated with this. So some of the costs and the benefits you see, or some of the barriers that may exist to people undertaking these types of practices. Could you give us a little bit more of a sense of that practically from your point of view?
Well, after the few years of doing this, we kind of got a system in place. And what I'm trying to do is, as far as money, the practical part of the money angle is where my goal was when I started this was soil erosion, not to lose any money, to break even. So, and that's basically where I'm at with the cover crops. Seeding the cover crops, I skip a whole spray pass, which is good. So that basically pays for the cover crop. So it's at a break-even situation. And as we get into it, the weed control is better. And with the crimping and rolling, then I can almost eliminate a whole nother spray trip. So we can almost control our weeds. I've planted 80 acres with absolutely no herbicides at all when everything went right. So now we're down to basically the average cost of conventional beans is almost $60 an acre in herbicide costs. This year we did $15 an acre is what our cost. Now I got some weedy beans because my crimping and rolling didn't work because of the wrong variety of cereal rye. So to crimp and roll to kill it, it has to be at anthesis, which is a hollow stem plant. And if it's not at that stage, it won't kill it. So these are all, when you talk to Wayne about the learning curve, the right varieties, the right suppliers, the right clovers. It cost me some money by making mistakes. And I thought this year I had it all figured out, and I wanted to roll everything, and the cereal rye just would not get to anthesis. It was a Ryman rye from the Dakotas, and it was 2 weeks longer than what I was used to. So you have to really do your research and all this stuff. And everything, all the cereal rye you buy is a variety not stated. So that's where Wayne comes in and Margaret comes in. I didn't really have very much help on this. I just jumped out on this thing on my own, and I've seen all the benefits, and I went from erosion to weed control to soil health, and that's my main focus now is soil health.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I could go on in this stuff that I've seen, but it does not happen overnight.
Yeah.
That's what I think when Margaret jumps into this program, you're going to get farmers jumping in this thing, and if they don't see a benefit the first year, and they probably won't, they probably lose money.
Yeah. So that's an onus of responsibility on companies like Cargill and others to be in this with the growers for the long term, to help growers through that journey long term. And that's the thing about, agriculture. It's a long term game. And you talked about passing, the next generation of agriculture, and that's just so important. And inherently, I think for people in agriculture, we know about long-term sustainability and long-term thinking. And I think that people outside agriculture now are coming to realize that, and coming to realize that agriculture is really part of the solution, not part of the problem here to some of these global challenges. And just that's why one of the reasons that there's just so much interest in panels like this now, and to learn more from people like you. And people are going to be inspired when they see it, because they hear you talk about the long term. They hear you talk about doing it without a lot of support. They hear you being open about the mistakes you've made, and now about the impact you can have. And it's just fantastic. And Wayne, you must see this with so many people you work with in soil health, and particularly around the economics. And I know you're an expert in this area. So, can you give us a bit of a flavour about some of the economic impact of these regenerative agriculture practices, defined in the broad terms that you're seeing through the study you're doing, Wayne?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. First, I'd like to just pick up for a moment on what Al was saying. I mean, our reality is that all biology is local. And so, what Al experienced there is what some farmers refer to as kind of that tuition that they pay in order to learn, learn to adopt these new practices and systems. And that's why I just think it's really important that we engage people like Al that can be mentors to other farmers, and that we also engage those local technical specialists that know what variety, of cover crop works here, and when it needs to be planted by, and what seeding rate, and when it needs to be terminated by, and the best methods for terminating it, and all those things that are very local decisions. And so I really applaud you, Al, for going out on your own and paying that tuition that I think others can benefit from, and hopefully, your neighbors will come over and take a look and learn from you too. So getting back to your question on the economics, we were really fortunate. First of all, I'm not an expert on economics. We have an ag economist on staff, and so I'm fortunate to be able to relay some of the information he and our agronomist found. And this, again, was the generous support of Cargill. We interviewed 100 farmers across nine states and Midwest region that had been adopting these soil health systems or regenerative systems for many years. Our minimum was 5 years before we would interview them. And we interviewed them about their practices, and we were very, very excited about the results. Some 85% of those growing corn had increased their net income by using soil health systems or regenerative soil health systems. And some 88% of those growing soybean increased their net income. It ranged widely because, again, all biology is local, and every farm is different, and different farm managers are different. But a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it was from reducing input costs. In general, averaging across 100 farms, they reduced input costs by $24 per acre for corn and $16 per acre for soybean. And a significant amount of that was from reducing things like fuel and labor and tractor wear and tear when they convert to no-till. And so going from a moldboard plow or chisel plow to a no-till situation, then it allowed them to reduce a lot of those input costs in year one. As soon as they changed to no-till. And then they had some real significant increases in net income, averaging across, again, 100 farms, and the wide, scale around each of those averages. But like $52 per acre increase in net income for corn and 45 per acre for soybean. So very significant. That was probably the most surprising part of it to me, was just how substantial those increases were. One other thing I wanted to share with you, though, is not just the economics, but we asked them about some of their other observations on their land. 97% said that these soil health management systems like no-tillage and cover crops help them build more resilience to things like drought and heavy precipitation. And 93% said it gave them quicker access to their fields in the spring. And so these are just some of those additional benefits that, definitely tie into the economic picture, but something that, you don't just always quantify. But we made a point of asking some of these questions, and I felt like that was just really useful additional information.
That's excellent, Wayne. Really insightful, and one of the things I love about hearing you talk is taking, and Al, of course, taking the concepts, some of the concepts into the practical, not just benefit, but the cost on the farm, and also that over time, because it makes it real. And if we're going to engage people in scalable, meaningful action here, it needs to be real and work for the growers, of course, as we've all been talking about. And so that expertise and that type of analysis, so that you can have meaningful, practical conversations with people, is just so important. And so I commend you and your team for the work you've done there. And so, Margaret, when you hear Al talk and Wayne talk about some of the costs, the benefits, and then over time, obviously you're very familiar with that as well. And so, does PepsiCo get involved in supporting growers, over the longer term in these types of endeavours? And what's your view on some of the economics around regenerative agriculture?
Sure. First and foremost, I think what we try to do is we try to listen to farmers, and we try to listen to those experts who know what they're talking about in this realm. Al, it's great to hear you talk about some of the challenges, some of the successes. And as we're trying to implement this across 60 different countries, and knowing that every single field, it's not even just every county might be different, but the north side of the field and the south side of the field might have different reactions to the same kind of treatment. So how we're always thinking about how do we roll out a global program which does have hyper-local impacts and hyper-local needs. And a lot of what Al, what you said, and Wayne, we have codified into our approach is about a sort of a three-legged stool, and the finances is one part of it. And it goes beyond just sort of a single farm, but thinking about that system. How do we work with banks, with insurance in different countries to make sure that the benefits of these systems are something that farmer can see in an economic return, and that their economic partners can see as making them more resilient, and they can help push on that economic pillar of that stool, and where PepsiCo gets involved as well in places where we need to help the farmer invest for the long term. Another one of those legs of the stool that was talked to that we absolutely hold as paramount is culture. Having folks like Al able to help mentor their neighbors is the most important thing. I mean, I know my dad's sort of on the farm, and my mom, they kind of listen to their extension agent. They kind of listen to their fertilizer salesman. They kind of listen to their insurance people. But who they really listened to were their neighbors. What they really wanted to know from their extension agent was, what did, Wendell down the road? What did he do? How did he get that green corn? So having folks like Al able to mentor each other in those local areas where they know way more than, anyone from PepsiCo is going to about what works and what fails, because you learn a whole lot from what fails, is really critical. And we had one of our farmers tell me once, all my neighbors have these bare dirt fields. They're all nice and brown. And I've got all this stubble, and now I got little green things coming up through it. I'm embarrassed to go to church because somebody asked me, why are your fields so sort of messy looking? And so we've got to change that culture. We got to make that the field that everyone wants to say, how come your field looks so cool? How come you've actually got soil that's still on your field? Whereas we're seeing in the flash flood, every other stream is brown and yours has clear water flowing. That's important. And that's really critical. The third leg of the stool for us is, again, what Wayne and Al talked to, is that technical support. Having localized agronomists, independent agronomists, folks who really can talk to, folks in the Soil Health Institute who can really talk to which kind of cereal variety to plant and when you terminate and how to figure that out. That's really important. And having that localized expert technical support is something that in any of our programs we think is really critical. So whenever we're thinking about regenerative agriculture, we're thinking about that three-legged stool and what it looks like in any given place.
That's great. Thanks, Margaret. And so if we could just stay with you for a minute as we think about, we've talked about practices on farm, soil health, the economics of soil health, and some of the factors and things that are important to support growers through that. But given we've got the opportunity to, with you today, and because of your reach with the consumers, consumers have obviously got high expectations about sustainability and these types of initiatives to companies like PepsiCo, Cargill, and others. But in all this discussion about markets and environmental markets developing, I mean, how are you seeing really that consumer signal? Are you seeing those price signals and those consumer signals through the supply chain that we can then take back to the farm? Is that still evolving, or just a basic consumer expectation? What are you seeing on some of the insights on the consumer's side about regenerative agriculture?
Well, it's a really good question. And I think regenerative agriculture is maybe just one of the latest names for consumers who care about where their food comes from. I mean, if you go to a grocery store, there's more than 365 different certifications. That's one for every day of the week if you want to learn about them. So, I mean, you've seen this consumer interest in knowing about where your food comes from and wanting it to be beneficial to communities and to the earth for a long time. And I think that is continuing to evolve, and we're going to continue to see that interest increase over the past year and a half with supply chain disruptions, with COVID, with people cooking at home. You've seen more and more interest in food systems and understanding where food comes from. It's not going away. It only continues to increase. The complexity of understanding what any company says is also increasing. But I think at the end of the day, some of this consumer interest is no longer thinking about which certification or what characteristics that product might have. But companies like ours, it's now table stakes to have real commitments that you can point to progress on. Now, it's not the leading edge now to have a climate commitment per se. It's the leading edge to be saying exactly what you're doing about it and prove it. But to be committed to really making a difference is now table stakes for companies because of consumers and because of their interest. And so for us, the rubber meets the road when it comes to how do we credibly talk about and prove what we're doing and what we're committed to. And that then rolls from us all the way down to the farmer. And we are working really hard to sit in the middle ground between really credible reporting. This is coming to a fore in the greenhouse gas arena and climate change. And how do we report on the impacts that are happening in our supply chain and why all these different actions by farmers matter without making Al spend his entire day filling out spreadsheets? Because you know what? He's got a farm to run. So for us, having credible enough data for us to report on impacts about what's happening all the way through our supply chain, while making it simple and practical for farmers and for every other step of the supply chain to report, is sort of on the horizon as one of those big challenges right now.
Great, thanks, Margaret. Appreciate that. Wayne, can I go back to you? And I do so intentionally because I do want to finish with Al, just as I started with him, because it really does start with the grower. But Wayne, just talking about the consumer and talking about consumer expectations, table stakes. We're hearing a lot of discussion about environmental markets and carbon markets. So can I ask, when you did that study or some of the economics, are you factoring in carbon values, for example, into that study, or are you really looking at the economics of soil health? And then there may be opportunities for farmers to get involved in these pathways. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we were not like really including like the cost or the payments to farmers for carbon, or we actually didn't even include USDA payments for using some of those practices, because they're temporary and not every farmer gets them, subscribes to them. And of course the carbon market's being somewhat nascent right now. But I find it very, very exciting to think that there can be this additional source of income for farmers, for storing carbon in their soils. And I think even if the markets didn't work so well, even if they got saturated, even if the prices, weren't what they needed to be, I believe that if it's enough of a kind of a spurring for getting more adoption of these soil health promoting practices, the farmers are going to see that these benefits are so good that they're not going to want to go back. Because when you store more carbon in your soils, then you can increase available water holding capacity and therefore drought resilience. And you can build this aggregation so that soil will now take in that heavy rain. And so your roots can now penetrate the soil easier and take up nutrients and water. And so there's just these additional benefits, because all that leads to greater yield stability in a drought period and therefore more profitability. And so I find it really exciting thinking that these markets are taking off, but also realize that there are all these additional co-benefits of these same practices in building carbon in the soil. And carbon is not the only component for soil health. It's one, but not the only one, but it's a key one. And so that can be a nice kind of a transition into really focusing on improving soil health. And I have to also say, while I have the microphone, that hearing you like Margaret speak about PepsiCo's commitment, and I know the commitment that Cargill has made and many others are making, I do find that also a really exciting part of it, a part of the picture, because I'm seeing corporations really get serious about these sustainability goals, climate goals, carbon goals, sometimes water quality goals. And when I say get serious, they're not just giving it, I don't know, words, but they're making investments to work with farmers and others that work with farmers to help make it happen. And so I think that we just have a real opportunity here for really kind of elevating a lot of the adoption that then can lead to these greater societal benefits also, not just for the farmer, but for the environment and therefore for all of society.
That's really insightful. Thanks, Wayne. And you're absolutely right. I mean, just speaking for Cargill, we have made serious commitments over a long period of time, and indeed, a year ago, probably this week, made a commitment to support regenerative agricultural practices over 10 million acres in North America by 2030. And we're now running a portfolio of programs to support farmers like Al with soil health, and indeed getting access to new environmental or carbon pathways, and really setting up farmers to take advantage of that longer term, while focusing on the economics of supporting soil health practices right now. Exactly what you've been talking about. It's exciting. It's an onus of responsibility to really stand alongside our farmers, and we're learning every day about it from people like your good selves on the panel. And so with that, we are running out of time, but Al, I just would like to go back to you where we started, because you are more than any of us at the front line of actually making the difference, implementing the practices and going through the journey. And so I'd just like to ask whether you've got any reflections or thoughts to end with, including about, when you hear about, new carbon markets and environmental markets, it's clear that you didn't get involved for that because you've been doing it for some time. but do you have a perspective on all of this discussion that seems to be abound in regard to these environmental markets?
I do. You might not like the what I have to say about it all, but one of the things that consumers, Margaret was talking about, when we tell our non-farming friends that we've skipped a spray trip or 2 spray trips, they get excited about that. The consumer is concerned about herbicides, nitrates, and triazines and all that in our water supply with good reason. So I can talk about the carbon market a little bit. The biggest thing, I think, is the technical support and the knowledge from Wayne and Margaret. That's what the farmer needs, more so than the carbon credit money. If you throw money just at the farmers, they're going to jump into this thing for the wrong reasons, and you're going to lose half of them, because they probably won't see the benefits the first year. And that's one of the things. And I think the other thing I don't like about it is that, the people that have been doing it aren't eligible. And the people that have been doing it, they're going to keep trying new things. And I'm still going to keep trying new things, but this is a big learning curve. Since we started this thing, we have changed, and we're changing every year. But I've seen the water infiltration, the soil health, the earthworms, the soil structure of the soil actually change, that it can support equipment. But to get the farmer to be convinced of this, it doesn't happen in a year or two. It takes a while, right, Wayne? It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about it. But I think technical support and knowledge is more important than money to get this carbon credits and all this stuff going. You got to give them support.
That's excellent. We really appreciate and respect that point of view. And one thing we're seeing, you talked about some of the issues about people that have already been doing things and trying things, and you get into technical issues in carbon markets. It's about additionality. And what we're seeing is that these markets, many of these markets, they weren't set up for agriculture. But if we're going to make a real difference, agriculture's got to be part of the solution. And so we're going to have to be evolving how these markets work and the rules and protocols around them, and listening to people like your good self about what works, what doesn't, what's important, what's not. And that's another reason that we need to get, people like yourself and other farmers' voices into these global conversations, like these UN conversations that are happening, this week and after, to make sure that as markets develop, they work for farmers. And so absolutely respect what you're saying, Al. And again, just from Cargill, another reason why we've got a portfolio of products, not just one type of program, because people have got different views, different objectives on their operation, different production systems, and it's got to fit for growers such as yourself, and not just a blanket approach. So thanks, Al, for those comments. Really appreciate it. Wayne, for your comments and clear expertise that you've talked about today in terms of soil health and your organisation. And Margaret, of course, your expertise and exposure, not just to the consumer, but also to the farmer and all the activity you're undertaking in between that. And we so appreciate hearing your voices today, the three of you. I'm sure the audience, some of whom won't be close to the farm, are going to find it so insightful, and the practical application of what the three of you have been talking about. And we wish you all the best in your particular endeavour, in your particular part of the agri-food sector, to make a difference as you are. And on behalf of Cargill, just want to thank you for your time, and thank the audience for watching and participating, and learning more about regenerative agriculture in that broad definition. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Ben.
Thanks.